Welcome back to this episode of the Mayoral Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Mayer. Before I get into today's content, please make sure that you hit the like button, subscribe, and share with friends and family if you like the content you see here today. Now, a lot has happened over the last week, from the fires in Maui to Trump getting indicted for a fourth time. So there's a lot for me to cover here. I'm just going to jump right into the content. First thing I'm going to cover is just more nonsense with COVID. You would think that after 3.5 years we'd be past this COVID nonsense. There's still sentiment from people that are COVID truthers that will never let this go and continue this nonsense that the vaccine is the only thing saving people and it's a forever COVID. There's other people that have kind of backed off that position. I think those people are smart to do so. However, they are also aware of the data and the information that's been put out over the last year and a half, showing that everything that was done, all these measures, they were not working at all. They never were working, and that people in power actually knew that they weren't going to work, and yet they pushed them anyway. This post here is on Twitter, and it shows the deaths of low-vax Palestine were similar to high-vax Israel. Not so for Omicron. So you could see the chart here, and it's starting in March 21st of 2020, basically the beginning of the pandemic. And these two places, Israel and Palestine, stay pretty close to each other during the entire pandemic until you get to about March of 2022. Palestine levels off and Israel continues up. So that's one data point that shows two countries right next to each other, different approaches with the vaccine, and the one that now is in better shape in terms of deaths is Palestine. However, Israel continues to go up, and even if the chart cut off at March of 2022, you would say, well, what's the difference between the two of them? Those numbers are pretty similar to each other. You see, until about 2021, when the vaccine came out, Palestine was in front of them in terms of less deaths. They jumped them, went back underneath them, went back over, and they stayed pretty, once the vaccine came out, they stayed pretty even with each other for that time frame, from about February of 2021 till about March of 2022. And then the deaths flattened off for the state of Palestine, and Israel continued up. So this just came out last week. This is in the United Kingdom, and it says 92% of COVID deaths in 2022 were triple vaxxed, and this is August 6th of 2023. There's a lot of charts, and I'll link this article in the description below because I think that there's a lot of good data in here. However, I'm not going to read every single piece of it, but I am going to show the things, basically 2022, showing that COVID deaths by vaccination status in England, and from January 1st, 2022 to December 31st, 2022, so the entire year. By that time, anyone who wanted the vaccine would have had it. In a lot of cases, people got the booster shot and maybe even the second booster shot. And you look at the people on the red, in the red, is 25,700 people that were ever vaccinated versus 2,200 people that were completely unvaccinated COVID deaths. So the total number of deaths is just over 28,000 for 2022 in the United Kingdom. And of that, 25,700 were among fully vaccinated people, which means that the fully vaccinated population counted for 92% of the deaths in the year 2022. So let's not forget, and it continues on here, and it says, these aren't the kind of figures that you would expect if COVID shots really are up to 95% effective. Remember that they pushed that this was extremely effective throughout the time frame when they were trying to force vaccination on people, basically from the middle of 2021 all the way through the middle of 2022, and then they kind of backed off it once more and more data was in everyone's face, and everyone could clearly see that there was no benefit in getting the vaccine, or very little, if any. So here's a supercut. So for people that come at you and say, well, no one ever really said that, here's a supercut of people in power, people from the CDC director all the way to Bill Gates, the president of the United States, saying exactly that it would prevent spread, and if you get the COVID vaccine, you will not contract COVID. Well, the numbers from the UK show a completely different story. Here's a supercut.
Not just protecting themselves, but reducing their transmission to other people and allowing society to get back to normal?
We can kind of almost see the end. We're vaccinating so very fast. Our data from the CDC today suggests, that vaccinated people do not carry the virus, don't get sick.
Getting vaccinated and getting a booster shot when eligible can save your life and protect you and your family and friends from getting seriously ill and spreading infection.
What do you think the probability is? 80%?
Personally, I think it's 100%. I think that there's a reduction in transmission.
Right. COVID, if you have these vaccinations.
We have all the vaccines we need. We just need our people to take it. A, for their own protection, for the protection of their family, but also to break the chain of transmission. You want to be a dead end to the virus. So when the virus gets to you, you stop it. You don't allow it to use you as the stepping stone to the next person.
Now we know that the vaccines work well enough that the virus stops with every vaccinated person. A vaccinated person gets exposed to the virus does not infect them. The virus cannot then use that person to go anywhere else. It cannot use a vaccinated person as a host to go get more people. That means the vaccines will get us to the end of this.
But when we looked at the emergency use authorization, which is right on the screen, if you look what it says under transmission, this is what was known the moment they were making those statements. Can I have the next slide, please? What was known was that the data are not there, limited to assess the effects of the vaccine against transmission of SARS-CoV-2. They had no idea. They had no idea if it would stop the infection, yet they were making those statements on the news.
Plus, the Pfizer COVID vaccine tested on stopping the transmission of the virus before it entered the market. If not, please say it clearly. If yes, are you willing to share the data with this committee? And I really want a straight answer, yes or no, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you very much.
Regarding the question around, did we know about stopping immunisation before it entered the market? No. We had to really move at the speed of science.
So there you have elites all over the country claiming that if you get the vaccine, you're no longer going to be a vector of transmission. The virus stops with you. They lied over and over again. At the end of that clip, you see the data that was out there that was presented to the FDA before the mass release of the vaccine, saying that they didn't know if they were going to be able to stop the spread of the virus with the vaccine itself, but the media and our politicians ran with it anyway. And you even saw the very last part, a high-ranking person within the Pfizer organization saying there was no way for them to know, yet they were okay with pushing that. There was at no point did Pfizer come out and say, hey, look, there's nothing in our research that you can't get the virus and spread it if you get the vaccine. People were perfectly willing to go along with the lie with Pfizer until somebody was actually under oath, finally telling the truth, saying that they never knew if this would actually stop the transmission of the virus. So let's never forget what they said and what they did. And yet, there are people out there still saying that these methods that we use, these lockdowns, masking, vaccines, they actually work. Here's a clip from PBS of an expert saying that we should be wearing masks still in 2023. Listen to this clip. Check it out.
Specific advice and tips you might have. I'm just going to name a topic and a quick answer. Masks.
Yes, you should be wearing masks in crowded areas, especially.
Masks. Going back to the masking. Masking, all the research on masking for respiratory disease prior to COVID was that it doesn't stop anything. Fauci himself in March of 2020 came out and said it's not going to do anything. Then he got the message from people up above him saying, hey, we need to put a muzzle on everyone. Let's force the masking and pretend like it works. So we had to play along with the charade for almost 2 years of masking in public and putting masks on planes, when traveling on planes. And the research came out, there was no difference. It was the same information that we already knew, yet people were trying to pretend like that information never existed. Then they did it specifically for COVID and realized that the transmission never slowed. And now there's people like this coming out again saying that we should be masking. Unbelievable.
During a surge.
But what about at home when you're walking on the street?
So certainly at home it works if you want to reduce household transmission.
Certainly at home it works if you want to reduce household transmission. Just unbelievable. Here's another graph here just showing the difference between some of these countries and the way that they handled the pandemic. And you see here all the way on the right-hand side with the least amount of deaths is Sweden. And Sweden really didn't do anything. They didn't have draconian measures. They didn't have vaccine passports, anything like that. And actually, you see all like the Nordic countries, Norway and Denmark in there too. Those were the countries that did the best, and they were the least restrictive. And then you see countries like Israel that had the highest vaccination rate, and the excess deaths for Israel is one of the higher for developed countries. And then Canada's right next to them. And Canada implemented passports and strict lockdowns. So it's just another data point to point to, hey, if they worked, then why didn't they work? Why is Canada and Israel not on the far right end of this chart? Instead, they're closer to the far left end of the chart. And why wouldn't Sweden be all the way to the left? They should be the worst country because they didn't do any of these measures. However, I mean, you can't argue with some of these people. I don't know how many data points you need to prove that the measures that were implemented during COVID did not work at all. And people are still going to go back to it. You have this woman on PBS just the other day talking about going back to masking when there's absolutely no evidence that masking works at all anywhere. I came across this clip, and this is from Dr. David Martin. And it's a little bit longer of a clip, but when I saw this, it floored me. And this is coming from somebody who did not take the vaccine, refused to take the vaccine because I didn't believe it was working, and I believed my company, and I got fired for it, my company did not have the right to do that. Actually, I take that back. I stand on principle here. They have the right to do it. I don't think that they should. So I wasn't going to take the vaccine. However, a private company should be able to do whatever they want. They should have any rules that they want as a prerequisite for employment, if that makes sense. Now, I disagree with their position on the vaccine, so therefore I didn't get the vaccine. And I could have gotten the vaccine. I could have caved. I could have gone for a BS exemption that they may or may not have accepted. But I chose to stand firm and say I wasn't going to get the vaccine. I was going to stand on my conviction and got fired for it. So when I saw this, the hair stood up on the back of my neck. I couldn't believe what this guy was saying. And apparently this doctor has been saying this for years. So here's a clip. Dr. David Martin, check him out. He's been on this from the early 2000s, from SARS-1. So check out this clip.
And not surprisingly, by the time we got to 1990, we found out that coronavirus as an infectious agent was an industrial problem for two primary industries, the industries of dogs and pigs. Dog breeders and pigs found that coronavirus created gastrointestinal problems, and that became the basis for Pfizer's first spike protein vaccine patent, filed, are you ready for this, in 1990. Did you hear what I just said? 1990. Operation Warp Speed? I'm sorry. Where's the warp and the speed? Pfizer, 1990, the very first spike protein vaccine for coronavirus. Isn't that fascinating? Isn't it fascinating that we were told that, well, the spike protein is a new thing. We just found out that that's the problem. No. As a matter of fact, we didn't just find out it was not just now the problem. We found that out in 1990 and filed the first patents on vaccines in 1990 for the spike protein of coronavirus. And who would have thought? Pfizer. Clearly the innocent organization that does nothing but promote human health. Clearly Pfizer. The organization that has not bought the votes in this chamber and in every chamber of every government around the world. Not that Pfizer. Certainly they wouldn't have had anything to do with this. But oh yes, they did. And in 1990, they found out that there was a problem with vaccines. They didn't work. You know why they didn't work? It turns out that coronavirus is a very malleable model. It transforms and it changes and it mutates over time. As a matter of fact, every publication on vaccines for coronavirus from 1990 until 2018, every single publication concluded that coronavirus escapes the vaccine impulse because it modifies and mutates too quickly for vaccines to be effective. And since 1990 to 2018, that is the published science, ladies and gentlemen. That's following the science. Following the science is their own indictment of their own programs that said it doesn't work. And there are thousands of publications to that effect, not a few hundred, and not paid for by pharmaceutical companies. These are publications that are independent scientific research that shows unequivocally, including efforts of the chimera modifications made by Ralph Baric in the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. All of them show vaccines do not work on coronavirus. That's the science. And that science has never been disputed. But then we had an interesting development in 2002. And this date is most important because in 2002, the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill patented, and I quote, an infectious replication defective clone of coronavirus. Listen to those words, infectious replication defective. What does that phrase actually mean? For those of you not familiar with language, let me unpack it for you. Infectious replication defective means a weapon. It means something meant to target an individual, but not have collateral damage to other individuals. That's what infectious replication defective means. And that patent was filed in 2002 on work funded by NIAID's Anthony Fauci from 1999 to 2002. And that work, patented at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, mysteriously preceded SARS 1.0 by a year. Dave, are you suggesting that SARS 1.0 wasn't from a wet market in Wuhan? Are you suggesting it might have come from a laboratory in the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill? No, I'm not suggesting it. I'm telling you that's the facts.
When I saw that, I was absolutely floored by that information. I really didn't know how to react to it. Like this is information that has been out there since 1990. They knew since 1990 that SARS or COVID, coronaviruses, whatever, they mutated too quickly for any vaccine to be effective. They knew that, and that was the published science for 28, 29 years. Thousands of papers out there. I didn't know that those papers existed. That clip is about 20 minutes long. It's about 22 minutes long. I will put the link to that clip in the description of this video because I suggest everyone go see it because there's even more information in there that guy puts out there. And it's really shocking to hear patents formed for the spike protein back in 1990, them claiming that the spike protein was a relatively new thing in 2020, and that's what they were going to attack. The knowledge that coronaviruses escape vaccines, and they knew about it, and yet they still forced these vaccines out there. They pushed them out there and said that they were going to solve all the problems of the pandemic. And then on top of that, the suggestion that SARS-1 was man-made as well, and it happened in 2002, 2003, right before the SARS-1 pandemic, or epidemic. It ended up not being the pandemic that SARS-2 was. And you think about it, the conspiracy starts going through my head of the possibility, well, the timing on both of these were right before re-election campaigns for the two Republicans, for George Bush and then for Donald Trump. Now, for George Bush, it ended up being not a big deal, SARS-1. But SARS-2 for Donald Trump ended up being a pretty big deal. And I think even very liberal Democrats would admit that if it weren't for COVID, Trump would have won re-election without all the shenanigans that they did too. The mass mail-in ballots, the illegally changing of election laws in certain states, the nefarious activities that were happening, even with all that, Donald Trump would have cruised back to his reelect effort in 2020 if SARS had not, or COVID had not come out. So again, I'll put the link in the description below. Please check out the entire video. And I know that was a little bit longer of a clip, but it is very important. Now onto the culture wars. Now, I said in the past, the culture wars are essentially two things. They are race and LGBT stuff. The LGBT stuff is something that they could kind of hit on at any point at any time. And recently, Wayne Brady came out as pansexual, which to me he's coming out as needing more attention, right? Anytime I see these celebrities or pseudo-celebrities, TikTokers, YouTubers, whoever, that come out as bisexual, in this case pansexual, to me, that's something that I see as a grab for attention. You're not coming out as gay. Wayne Brady's not coming out and saying that he's gay. He's pansexual, which means essentially he's attracted to everybody. But if he only has relationships with women, then he's really just a heterosexual that's pretending to be bisexual, pansexual. Now, I don't know any of his relationships. I don't know for sure that this is true. But when I see studies of people that are in Gen Z, now obviously Wayne Brady's not Gen Z, but when I see these studies and the number of people that identify as LGBT is 20%, 21%, whatever that number is, I wonder how many people in that group identify as bisexual or pansexual, something that is a bit ambiguous. And you could say, well, I'm a female, I find other females attractive, therefore I'm bisexual, but not actually ever really be a bisexual, just somebody who's moderately attracted to the same sex. Therefore, they're claiming that equity as a bisexual to be part of the LGBT community. Probably never dated any woman, maybe never even hooked up with another woman, maybe once, but claiming to be a bisexual to have that equity. So when I see things like this, I see Wayne Brady saying, hey, I'm coming out as needing more attention. People need to pay more attention to me. Now I'm pansexual. So anytime I see something like this, and especially a celebrity, someone who's 50 years old, like I don't really believe it. I don't buy it. From that to Best Buy, apparently Best Buy has been a pretty woke corporation for a very long time. Information just came out from O'Keefe Media Group showing that their management program, or whatever they're calling it, is only open to minorities. So this piece here is just talking about how they're facing blowback and it's time to Bud Light Best Buy. Now, I said from the time that Bud Light got in the headlines for their Dylan Mulvaney controversy, I said then that it was always going to be easy to boycott Bud Light because most people, when they consume Bud Light, are buying it at a store or a bar where there's multiple other options, and all they have to simply do is grab the other case in the fridge or order the other beer. Now, Best Buy might be slightly more difficult just because it's a standalone store. However, in terms of electronics, it's not unique. There's nothing that Best Buy has other than being like the all-in-one kind of stop for electronics that other stores do not. And with the amount of online shopping people do, the ability to order something one day and be on your doorstep in the next day or two from Amazon, Best Buy has probably become more and more relevant as time went on. And this is just one of those things that is going to drive it into complete obscurity and potentially end up bankrupting it. People like me, I'm not going to go to Best Buy. They're openly discriminating against people. I said in previous videos, you can discriminate for whatever reason you want. I don't care that Best Buy discriminates against hiring or promoting white employees. That's up to them. They're allowed to do so. But I don't have to shop there, and I won't. And if they did the same thing for black people or Hispanic people, that those people were not eligible for promotions, I wouldn't shop there as well. I don't like when people do that. However, they have the right to do so. And you know what? Bud Light's going to find out that people have the right to shop somewhere else, and they will. From this piece here, a memo from the retail giant Best Buy was revealed Tuesday highlighting the company's professional development program for employees who identified as Black, Latino, Hispanic, Asian, or Pacific Islander. The program is not open to white applicants, investigative journalist James O'Keefe said. So I will actually show you the tweet that he has where he has a screenshot from the application. I guess this is an internal application from Best Buy. I'll click on it here and you will see in this image it's required. To which cohort do you identify? Black, Hispanic, Latino, and then Asian Pacific Islander. White is not even an option. So you have to be a minority in order to move on to the next screen to submit your application. So again, go ahead, Bud Light, or sorry, go ahead, Best Buy, Bud Light yourself. It doesn't matter to me. You can go right on and drive yourself into obscurity. You're already heading there anyway. You may as well throw gasoline on that fire because you are going to be gone in short order. Not to be outdone is Disney. Disney has been a very woke company for a very long time. And I said from the beginning, I said when I started this podcast, first time when we started talking about Bud Light, that Disney was always going to be a company that was going to be more difficult to boycott, and it was going to take a longer time for them to feel it. But they've started to feel it. And things like this are just going to keep more and more conservatives and give them more reason to not go to Disney, to not go see their movies, go to their amusement parks, whatever it might be. They clearly said, let's take a look at what Bud Light did, and let's do that ourselves, because that was a great business model, losing 25% of our revenue. Sounds great. This is from UK Daily Mail. Disney's Dylan Mulvaney moment as it partners with gender-fluid TikTok influencer Sean Altman to promote clothing for girls. Now, I don't have a daughter. I have a son, and I have another son on the way. But if I did have a daughter, I wouldn't want somebody selling to my daughter, my little child, a Minnie Mouse outfit that was a full-grown man. Maybe you do. I'm not going to buy something that's a grown man getting into a costume of a female cartoon character and acting like it's okay. Now, there's probably going to be people out there, I'm thinking about this in my head, like, oh, what about the characters at Disneyland? You don't want a man to be in the full costume. When they're in that full costume, and I've been to Disneyland, Disney World, they don't talk. They just kind of wave and whatever. It doesn't really matter who's in there. They see the character as the female or as the male, whatever they're meant to be. That's what the kids will see. So whoever's underneath that is irrelevant. But when you're actually putting on the dress as a man and showing that you are a man and pretending that you are a woman or gender fluid or whatever, that's where I have a problem. You'll see right here pictures of what this person looks like. Clearly a man. Kind of looks womanish, but a man that is dressed up in a Minnie Mouse outfit. And this is what Disney decided. They decided, let's get ourselves some Dylan Mulvaney action here. We need to have more controversy. Their films have been bombing lately, and this is what they go for. They are just telling you they hate your guts. Tell them to go fuck themselves. Don't buy any of their stuff. I want to take my son to Disneyland. Or Disney World, rather. I'm not going to. Not until they completely overhaul the absolute nonsense that they've been pushing on kids for the last decade. And I don't see that happening anytime soon. Bob Iger, he is not going to relent on this until he's let go. Here's some statistics on Disneyland, or Disney. This is the number of subscribers worldwide in the first quarter of 2020 through the third quarter of 2023. And you'll see the last 3 quarters have gone down, and actually a pretty significant drop over the last 2 quarters. So you see the peak of 164 roughly. It went down to 162, okay? Then you go down to 158, a little bit of a drop off. Now you're down to 147. And highlighted in this article is talking about how a lot of those subscribers were in India. It turns out that around the world, transgenderism is even less popular than it is in Western countries like the United States, Canada, and United Kingdom. People absolutely hate this stuff, especially traditional countries. You see these countries like India, these Middle Eastern, these African countries, they don't want that. Do we learn nothing from trying to put American capitalism over in the Middle East for the last essentially 30 years? We've been fighting wars over there since 1991, trying to implement a democratic government and push LGBT and gender fluid nonsense over there. They are not having it. Why are we trying to force what we believe or what the far left believes onto them. And it's not popular at all. And it will continue to not be popular, and places like Disney will continue to feel the heat. Meanwhile, in Mexico, it's apparently illegal to misgender somebody, and it's considered political violence. This person here was, and I'm not going to read through the article, but you could see the headline here. This person was found guilty of gender-based political violence for tweets. This is where we've gone to in this world and in the West, is that tweets will get you put in jail. But if you have the right politics, you can riot, you can loot, you can do whatever you want, and people don't really care. You saw the Summer of Love, the BLM and Antifa riots, and they call them mostly peaceful protests. They're clearly riots. There has been fallout from them. There's mass looting all over these liberal cities, and people are just getting away with it. They're stealing tens of thousands of dollars worth of merchandise every day, and nobody's stopping them because the left-wing politicians and the left-wing district attorneys in those areas are not punishing these crimes. They need to stop. However, you have this guy tweeting. I don't know exactly what he tweeted. It doesn't matter. The guy's found guilty of gender based political violence, whatever that even means, for a tweet. It's really unbelievable. And then I see stories like this. I saw this and I was like, wait a minute, hold on. Let me read this story, okay? Let me fully read this story. So you'll see here from CNN Health, transgender and non-binary patients have no regrets about top surgery. Small study finds. One of the most dishonest headlines you'll probably ever see. So if you go down here and actually read what it says. For the study, researchers surveyed 235 people who had gender-affirming mastectomies at the University of Michigan. Okay, very small study, fine. Of the participants, nearly 60% answered the survey accurately and returned it to the researchers. So whatever, I don't know what accurately means, but they threw out 41% of the responses. So of the 59% of the people that filled it out accurately, whatever that means, whatever their definition of filling out the survey accurately means, their median satisfaction score with the decision was a 5 on a 5 scale, indicating the highest possible level of satisfaction. If you throw out almost half the survey or half the respondents and you say 59% were completely satisfied with this, what does it mean that they filled it out accurately? Who knows? But this is the most misleading headline I've ever seen in my life. From culture wars to a tragedy that struck the island of Maui last week, the fire that happened and burned up Lahaina, I mean, it really went through so quickly that I think a lot of people have a lot of questions as to what really happened, what started it, why weren't people warned quicker, things of that nature. But then when you see things like this, you wonder why people come up with conspiracies and why they question what the media is telling them, why they question what politicians tell them. It's things like this. So this is Will Kane on Twitter here. It says, I'm in Maui West. Service is rough. Hard to post. But we're putting together stories of incredible citizens stepping up where the government has failed. And at Napali Plaza, somebody from Mayor Richard Bisson's office tries to shut me down, saying West Maui is a media-free zone. No, sir, this is still America, is what he puts on Twitter. Why is it media-free? Don't you think that the people deserve to have their stories told? The people deserve to know what's going on? And media-free zone in Maui. You know, you see things like that, and that's where conspiracy theories start. And then you see the governor say something like this. Check it out here on Twitter.
About preserving Lahaina moving forward.
I'm already thinking about ways for the state to acquire that land so that we can put it into workforce housing, to put it back into families, or to make it open spaces in perpetuity as a memorial to people who were lost. We want this to be something that we remember after the pain passes.
So they're already talking about the state acquiring the land. This land, that's part of the controversy too. This land in Lahaina, apparently a lot of it has been owned by native people that have lived there for generations and generations, well before Hawaii even became a territory of the United States, let alone a state of the United States. There's speculation that this was something planned, that they wanted to take over this extremely expensive land that the natives had held for years and years and would never sell. So there's no evidence of that to this point, other than the governor saying they're going to look into acquiring the land, like literally days after this tragedy just happened. And people have been saying that prior to that statement, that this was potentially trying to somewhat of a land grab, or was something that was going to be a land grab. So I don't know. Again, there's not evidence to that right now. If there is anything that comes out, or if it's completely debunked, I will certainly comment on it in the future. But as of right now, that's what people are saying, and that's where we're at. Meanwhile, there was a raid in Utah last week of a elderly man, a man in his 70s, for making threats to Joe Biden. And the FBI ended up shooting him, I don't know, a couple dozen times. I've read as many as 35, 36 shots were fired. You can see here that the raid was carried out at 6:15 local time. It says when the subject was shot and killed. Now, I posted something on Twitter about this, talking about how this reminded me of the Breonna Taylor incident, where the cops raided Breonna Taylor in the middle of the night. Apparently her boyfriend had fired at the police officers. They fired back. Breonna Taylor was shot and killed, right? So the shooting was justified by the police because they're there in the middle of the night and a gun was pointed at them. So in this case, the FBI is saying that the suspect brandished a weapon and pointed it at them and they fired back. So again, a justified shoot. This is where I posted on Twitter, said, hey, if anything, this should be an opportunity for people on the left and people on the right to come together on one issue, which is there should almost be no circumstance where there is a no-knock, middle-of-the-night warrant executed at a residence like this. Same thing with Breonna Taylor. These people had previously were surveilling this guy for months, so they couldn't have gotten to this guy at any point, let him come out of his house, even surrounded his house during the middle of the day, whatever, give him a chance to surrender. Same thing with Breonna Taylor. We should be on the same side. And I get trolls on Twitter saying, not the same thing, not the same thing. I'm not saying the circumstances are the same, you clowns. What I'm saying is that no matter what, as long as this is allowed, there's going to be someone making that decision, somebody that's going to be trying to get that middle of the night no-knock warrant, somebody in law enforcement that's going to be pursuing that. And then there's going to be somebody on the other end, on the judicial side, a judge, that is going to be granting it. And if both of those two people, or both of those two parties, don't align with your politics, you're going to disagree, you idiots. That's what happened in Breonna Taylor. Those people were going after her for a drug offense or whatever it was. I don't remember the exact circumstances. Alleged drug offense. And law enforcement decided that they were going to go for a no-knock warrant, and the judge agreed. Now, I don't know the details as to did it justify a no-knock warrant. The point is that they clearly do not align with somebody like you who's disagreeing with me on Twitter, that this is an opportunity to say, hey, we need to get rid of these. Instead, you make a stupid point that has nothing to do with the price of tea in China, saying that they're not the same thing. That's not the point I'm making. I'm not making that these are the same things. This guy made a threat, several threats against the President of the United States, and should have been investigated for it, right? Now, did it reach the threshold to warrant a search warrant at his house? Apparently it did, according to the judge that okayed it, and the FBI who sought it. But that's not the point. The point is that they should never happen unless it's a compound of from a drug cartel where everyone's armed to the teeth. You don't want to give them a knock on the door, like a knock on the compound door. Hey, we're coming in. But at a residential place, why is that ever necessary? So again, good job, people on Twitter, not even hearing anything that I'm saying. And that said, these people don't care about things like this. This is Kathy Griffin with a severed Donald Trump head. Was she ever investigated? I don't think so. There's plenty of threats against Donald Trump. Should they have been investigated? Yes. Should this guy have been investigated? Yes. But these weren't. I didn't hear any stories of somebody getting a warrant issued for their home for threats against Donald Trump online. And there were plenty, and there still are plenty of threats against Donald Trump online. That's part of the two-tier justice system that people are talking about. It's not just because it's Trump. It's because you investigated the person that threatened Biden, but you didn't investigate any of the threats against Donald Trump. That's the two-tier justice system. That's what Republicans and conservatives are complaining about. So then over the weekend, you have Attorney General Merrick Garland giving special counsel status to David Weiss after the plea deal blew up in the court of Delaware. So there's a lot of people wondering, well, why give this guy special counsel status now? There's a couple of things. One, the Attorney General had claimed, and David Weiss had claimed, contrary to whistleblower testimony of Gary Shapley, saying that he had full authority. Well, if he had full authority, then why does he need special counsel status? Doesn't make much sense at all. So Alan Dershowitz said this. He says, it's illegal. The regulation provides clearly that the special counsel have to come from outside the government for good reason. What's so special about the special counsel is that he doesn't have to answer to the present administration. He's independent. Harvard University law professor emeritus Alan Dershowitz said. We get to the point where Hunter Biden's supposed to get this plea agreement. There's a pretrial diversion that allows for him to be immune from any other future charges, including not registering as a foreign agent. Now, that's one of the things that wasn't actually covered in the plea agreement, but would have been protected by this pretrial divergence agreement. And the judge caught it, the deal blew up, and now they're allowing special counsel status for this investigation. Why do you need it now? Presumably, after this investigation had lasted since, I believe it started in 2019. After 4 years, why does he now need special counsel status? What is he going to find that he didn't previously find? The speculation is this is actually an attempt to now protect him from having to go in front of Congress and testify, because now he's got special counsel status, and it's ultimately just going to draw out this process longer to help protect Hunter and Joe from the corruption that they clearly were partaking in over the previous decade and a half, or however long it was. And this is just going to allow for this guy, if he's ever brought up in front of Congress, saying it's an ongoing investigation, he's a special counsel, he doesn't have to answer these questions. So now Congress cannot look into the claims from the whistleblowers on this investigation until it concludes. So it's clearly something that they're doing to try to deflect and take the heat off Joe, slow down this trial, and not get to the bottom of what was actually done by this attorney in this investigation. On Monday, Donald Trump was indicted again, and I think everyone kind of knew that this was going to happen. Another convenient timing of things that kind of coincide with Hunter Biden and his sweetheart deal and information that's coming out. They appoint a special counsel, everyone calls it BS on Saturday, and then the indictment comes down on Monday. So everything has been, something happens in the Hunter Biden case, Trump gets indicted. Something happens in the Hunter Biden case, Trump gets indicted. So the timing on it is very curious, although everyone kind of knew that this was going to happen anyway, that the grand jury in Georgia was going to indict him for election crimes. And here's the thing, when it comes to, more than anything, the D.C. case, the case that Trump tried to overturn the election. He was doing things that were illegal. And this is where the two-tier justice system that we talk about comes into play more than anything, in my opinion. And that is, they claim no one's above the law. So we're going to go after Donald Trump because he broke the law. Okay, fine. But at the same time, nobody is not protected by the law. So he's claiming First Amendment grounds with regards to him pleading to Mike Pence or talking to Mike Pence about not certifying the election. Democrats are claiming that this is an obstruction. Now Pence, and I'll play his statement from Fox News in just a minute. Pence never said that he was doing anything illegal. He only claimed that Trump was asking him not to certify the votes. So what you have to ask yourself is, no one's above the law. But is Trump not protected by the law? And what I mean by that is going to be evident in this clip I'm going to play you. It's a cut of Democrats from George Bush 1, George Bush 2, and Donald Trump election objecting to the certification of the votes. Check it out.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Waters, arise?
Mr. Vice President, I rise to object to the fraudulent 25 Florida electoral votes.
Is the objection in writing and signed by a member of the House and a senator?
The objection is in writing, and I don't care that it is not signed by a member of the Senate.
The chair will advise that the rules do care, and the signature of the senator.
Mr. President, I am objecting to the idea that votes in Florida were not counted, and it's a sad day in America, Mr. President, when we can't find a senator to sign these objections.
Gentleman will suspend.
I was not in this body 4 years ago, but what I observed as a voter, as a citizen of Illinois, 4 years ago were troubling evidence of the fact that not every vote was being counted.
Senator from New York.
Mr. President, this is obviously a difficult debate for many reasons, but I commend the senator from California for joining with members of the House, most particularly Congresswoman Stephanie Tubbs Jones, in raising the objection, because it does permit us to air some of these issues.
Why did a computing error in Franklin County initially award 4,258 extra votes to George Bush when only 638 people had actually voted?
I have an objection because 10 of the 29 electoral votes cast by Florida were cast by electors not lawfully certified.
I object to the votes from the state of Wisconsin, which should not be legally certified.
Mr. President, I object to the certificate from the state of Georgia on the grounds that the electoral votes were not.
Debate. There's no debate.
And I object to the certificate from the state of North Carolina.
I object to the 15 votes from the state of North Carolina. I object.
I object to the certificate from the state of Alabama. The electors were not lawfully certified.
Is it signed by a senator?
Not as of yet, Mr. President.
In that case, the objection cannot be entertained. The objection cannot be entertained. Debate is not in order.
Even with the
There is no debate in order. Is it signed by a senator? There is no debate. There is no debate in the joint session. There is no debate. There is no debate.
So most people know that Democrats were objecting to the certification of certain states in 2000, 2004, and 2016. Now, you have to ask yourself, again, is Trump not covered by the law? What he did, and I'll play the clip from Pence here in a second, was ask Mike Pence to not certify the election by rejecting votes from certain states. That's exactly what the Democrats that I just showed you were doing. They were appealing to the president of the Senate, which is the vice president of the United States. So here's Mike Pence saying what Trump did.
The president specifically asked me, and his gaggle of crackpot lawyers asked me to literally reject votes, which would have resulted in the issue being turned over to the House of Representatives, and literally chaos would have ensued.
So notice what Mike Pence did not say. He did not say that Trump tried to force him to not certify the vote. He said that Trump and his gaggle of crackpot lawyers, as he put it, asked him to not certify certain votes. It is the exact same thing that Democrats did in 2000, 2004, and 2016. The only difference is Trump is being put on trial for it. So meanwhile, there's another potential for Joe Manchin to leave the Democratic Party, which really doesn't mean anything. You saw Kristen Sinema in the state of Arizona did that. All she did was still caucus with the Democrats and be able to call herself an independent. This headline here from US Today says, Joe Manchin calling it toxic, and he's absolutely considering leaving the Democratic Party. Now, there's two ways to look at it. There's only two reasons he would possibly do that. The first reason is that he's actually going to run as president from a third party. I don't think he's going to do that. He knows that that ultimately would be probably favorable for Donald Trump if he put himself in that mix. And Democrats don't want him to do that. Obviously, if he declares himself an independent, he's not loyal to that party anymore. Not loyal to that party, but still kind of loyal to that party. The other reason is that he's actually losing in the state of West Virginia for his re-election campaign. At least polls have him behind right now. So if you take a look at 538 and take a look here for West Virginia, this is polls ending May 23rd, 2023 from East Carolina University, has Jim Justice up 22% against Joe Manchin. Justice has already got 54% of the votes if this poll is to be believed. So even with the percentage of people that are undecided, if they all break for Joe Manchin, that's not enough to put him into office. For those who don't know, Justice is the sitting governor of the state of West Virginia, very popular in the state of West Virginia, and it's a very red state. Now, Manchin was kind of a holdover from when it used to be more of a Democratic state back in the 90s, and was a former governor, and has been kind of the incumbent senator for a number of years. But I think he sees the writing on the wall that he is not going to win a re-election bid. So he's going to switch parties. The way that I look at it, he's going to switch parties to give himself a better chance to win in West Virginia. That's what I think he's going to do. I don't think he's going to run for president. Last thing here from the AP, it's talking about a special election that was held here in the state of Ohio last week. It says, voters in Ohio reject GOP-backed proposal that would have made it tougher to protect abortion rights. So basically, this issue that was on the ballot passed, or did not pass rather. It was 57-43 if I'm not mistaken, so a pretty overwhelmingly resounding no to this. What it would have done is made it harder for ballot or citizen-led ballot measures to amend the Constitution, which I'm in favor of. I think politics can swing one way or the other. The Constitution should be something that's harder to amend. However, the voters rejected it, and ultimately there's going to be an abortion issue that's going to go to the voters in the month of November this year. I think it's going to pass. The Democrats just flat out have a better ground game. The Republicans have essentially no ground game. I got a knock on my door to raise awareness. I live in a Democrat area, so I got a knock on my door from somebody trying to get me to get out and vote no. I got she gave me a flyer. I got 2 things in the mail, and one of which was from the state of North Carolina, saying vote no on issue 1. I stream a lot of things, so I don't really watch much live TV. But what I do stream, sometimes I'll watch things on YouTube or Rumble, whatever, and the ads that were on there were for saying no to issue 1. Now, I didn't see a ton of them, but I would see one every couple of days, one every 3 days, whatever it might be. But people, the Democrats are smart. They're targeting people in this area. Where I voted yes for it, they know that putting the money into an area like this and just raising awareness and getting people to get out and vote, in all likelihood, it's probably going to break 65-35 in their favor. And Republicans, they just don't do this. I don't see any ground game even in any of these Republican areas in the state of Ohio, which is a pretty red state. Republicans are just going to continue to lose these issues unless they build up their ground game. And I'm not really seeing very many people talk about that, with the exception of Charlie Kirk. I think he's starting to realize it. More Republicans need to realize the ground game needs to be picked up in order to win these elections and win these issues. That's it for this episode of the Mayoral Podcast. Please make sure on your way out to hit the like button, subscribe, and share with friends and family if you like the content you've seen here today. And I'll see you all in the next video.